Johnson County K-State Research and Extension. This video I am going to demonstrate how to prepare tamales. Doing an internet search, you will find many varieties for tamales. Meat-filled, vegan-filled, or sweet tamales. So my recipe includes classic pork tamales, that's what I refer to. And I was taught by my mother how to prepare these tamales. Making tamales in December and during Christmas time is a tradition in Mexico, Mexican-American communities, and Latino communities in the United States. A tamalada, a tamale making party, brings together family and friends to gather in one's home to make dozens of tamales. The interesting thing about a tamalada is it includes multiple generations of families, grandparents, parents, and children. Everyone involved in the tamalada has a job to do. And as I go through the demonstration, you will get an idea of the many tasks involved in making tamales. Another event in December that is special to some Latino communities is the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, December the 12th. Catholic parishes, some in the United States, honor Our Lady of Guadalupe on December the 12th with a Mass and festivities. And those festivities, after celebrating a Mass, include eating tamales and other treats. Also during the Christmas season, from December the 16th through the 24th, is a ceremony called Las Posadas. Families, neighbors, especially those in faith communities, reenact the journey of Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem. This event is known as La Posada. As the story goes, Mary and Joseph were denied refuge until finally a neighbor allows them to enter. And so a designated home is identified early in the process, and when Mary and Joseph arrive, the festivities begin. And it includes beverages, other Latin American treats, and tamales. All right, so let's get started. The recipe will be posted on the Johnson County K-State Research and Extension website under recipes. And the recipe is to make approximately 4 to 5 dozen tamales using these ingredients. For the demonstration, I will be making less. So let's begin with masa. Masa is basically corn and water with lime. I prefer buying my masa at a tortilla, a family-owned tortilla factory in my area. You might also be able to find masa at some local grocery stores, Hispanic stores, and some major chains. But there will not be a variety in my experience. It's one brand. My preference again is fresh masa. I ordered the day before I want to pick it up. I know it's fresh and I use it the same day. The other product are the corn husk. Corn husk can be found at most major grocery stores, and they come already packaged one pound. And that should produce 4 to 5 dozen tamales. The other ingredient for these classic pork tamales are chilies, or chiles. I call them chile. This brand or this type is a chile ancho. And they come in different sizes. The recipe calls for 8 to 10. They vary in heat, and it's difficult to tell what the heat level is, and I'll talk more about that later. Then the other ingredients that I'll be using today is a white onion, garlic, salt, shortening. Now, making tamales, there are some cooks that prefer pure lard. You can use vegetable shortening or vegetable oil. In my years of making these, I have gone from using pork in the early days with helping my mom to shortening, and then to vegetable shortening. Vegetable oil, it just depends on your personal preference. Other ingredients include cumin, and I also like to use Mexican oregano. For these pork tamales, I have purchased a Boston butt or pork shoulder. The recipe calls for 2.5 pounds of boneless pork shoulder or butt. If you buy a pork shoulder or Boston butt with the blade in, then consider the weight of the blade. And if you do that, then I would purchase a package of maybe 4 pounds. There are 2 ways that you might try cooking the pork. One is cubing it, and the other is submerging the pork, either way, in a nice, good-sized pot. Cover with water. Add a quarter of a white onion. Add 2 medium-sized cloves of garlic. I like garlic, so I usually put 3. And then a teaspoon of salt. Bring the pot with the pork in it to a boil and lower to a simmer. And cook for about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the way you cut your pork or whether it's whole. Oh, and let me also stress that the pork will have some fat, so it's best to remove as much as possible before cooking. After cooking and the pork is done, then let it cool. Remove from the water, and if you left it whole, then move to a platter and begin to shred, which is the method I have done. So next is the red chile sauce. And again, we're using chile anchos, which are dried poblano peppers. The heat value varies considerably. And you can use gloves if you're concerned about the heat of the pepper and the seeds. But we begin by removing the stem, cutting open the pepper, and the seeds pop out. You might have to dig a little to try to remove as many as you can. But it's okay if a few remain. You want to soak these in very warm water or hot water for about 20 minutes so they become softened. And here's an example of the peppers that have been soaking for at least 20 minutes. It's okay to soak them longer, but as you can see, they're very pliable, and you can see that there are still seeds in the water. You can shake them to remove them. So now for blending up the sauce. This is just a small portion of the recipe, only for demonstration. Let me be sure this is. So we want to drain the chilies. We want to add a clove or two of garlic, a teaspoon of oregano, cumin, a teaspoon of cumin. And by the way, that oregano that I used is Mexican oregano that can be found in most grocery stores. And a teaspoon of salt. And you blend. And you also want to add a little bit of some water at a time until it becomes a little runny, but not too runny. So let's start with a cup of water. Water reduces the heat of the chilies. If you want a little more spice, you can scoop in a little bit of the water reserve that the chilies were soaking in. So we have pureed the chiles, and depending on the power of your blender, you might find particles. So it's best to drain the chili to remove the seeds and the particles. So we've completed draining the chilies, and here, this is an example of the particles that are left behind to be discarded. The next step is to combine the meat with the chile ancho sauce. So in this pot, we've added 1 teaspoon of vegetable oil. And we would put this over a medium heat and slowly add the chile ancho sauce while over the heat. We're going to allow it to simmer for 15 to 20 minutes, and during that time, stir occasionally. Do not allow it to burn. And you will notice that the sauce thickens, and we want a little thicker sauce. Then we will add the pork meat after it's been simmering for 15 or 20 minutes. We'll allow the meat to incorporate with the sauce. You can set it aside. Now for the masa. I have
okay. Climb over that wall.
Yes.
You got it. You got it.
Now to prepare the masa. I begin with the vegetable shortening. And I'm going to add the baking powder. And I'm going to whip. And I want to whip to light and fluffy, and also I want to add the salt. You might want to clean the blade. Then we'll slowly add the masa and the broth from the cooked pork. If you do not want to use the broth, then substitute water. But you'll miss out on the flavor of the cooked